On the evening of March 5, 2008, Eve Carson's life looked exactly as it was supposed to. At just 22 years old, she was in the final stretch of her college journey. Living off campus in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, surrounded by friends and preparing for the future she had worked relentlessly to earn. That night, her roommates were getting ready to attend a party. Music played softly through the house as they gathered their things and invited Eve to come along. She declined. Eve had exams approaching and a long list of responsibilities waiting for her. Studying came first. It wasn't unusual for her to stay home while others went out. She was disciplined, focused, and known for making thoughtful choices. Around 1:30 a.m., her roommates left the house, leaving Eve alone at her desk, studying late into the night. But when they returned several hours later, sometime around 4:30 a.m., something immediately felt wrong. The front door was standing wide. Open. Lights inside the house were still on. The air felt unsettled. Eve wasn't there. At first, confusion outweighed fear. Her roommates checked the rooms, called her name, and looked outside. Eve's car was gone. That was strange, but not yet alarming. Maybe she had gone out unexpectedly. Maybe she had needed air or decided to meet someone briefly. They tried calling her phone, but there was no answer. Still, they waited. As the morning passed, concern grew heavier. Eve was responsible. She didn't disappear without explanation. She didn't leave doors open. She didn't vanish in the middle of the night without telling someone. By midday, panic replaced hope. One of her friends contacted the police to report her missing. That was when everything changed. Investigators listened carefully, then delivered a chilling revelation. Earlier that morning, officers had responded to a call about gunshots and screams in a neighborhood roughly a mile away. There, they had found the body of a young woman. No identification. No phone. No wallet. They showed Eve's friend a photograph. Recognition was immediate. Eve Carson was already gone, within hours. What began as a missing person case transformed into a homicide investigation. The timeline was horrifyingly short. Somewhere between studying quietly at home and the rising sun, Eve Carson had been taken, driven away, and killed, and no one yet knew why or by whom. To understand the shock that followed Eve Carson's death, you have to understand who she was long before that night. Eve was born on November 19, 1985, in Athens, Georgia, and from an early age, she stood apart not because she demanded attention, but because she earned respect. She was driven in a way that felt rare. Even in high school, Eve balanced leadership, academics, and service effortlessly. She served as vice president of the student council, volunteered at shelters and nursing homes, worked as a congressional page, and assisted in a stem cell research lab, all while maintaining exceptional grades. Teachers described her as focused and compassionate. Friends described her as warm, intelligent, and deeply motivated. After graduating with honors, Eve attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where her ambition only intensified. She pursued a demanding double major in political science and biology, earning a prestigious scholarship that recognized both her intellect and leadership. On campus, Eve became a familiar and admired presence. She held leadership roles in major student organizations and was often the person others turned to for guidance, but Eve's impact extended beyond the university. She taught science to elementary school students, volunteered internationally, and dedicated summers to humanitarian and medical work abroad. She studied in Cuba, assisted doctors in Ecuador, and joined research efforts in Egypt. These weren't resume fillers, they were reflections of who she truly was. Even before graduating, Eve had secured a job offer from a major company. Her future was already unfolding, step by step, exactly as planned. Those close to her believed she was destined for meaningful work in public service, medicine, or policy fields where her intelligence and empathy could truly change lives. That's why her death shattered the community. This wasn't someone living on the edge. This wasn't a risky lifestyle or poor decisions. Eve Carson did everything right. She stayed in to study. She locked herself into responsibility. And still, she became a victim. As word spread across campus, disbelief turned into grief, and grief turned into fear. If someone like Eve, disciplined, cautious, and brilliant, could be taken from her own home, then no one felt safe. The question haunted everyone: how could this happen to her? Once Eve's identity was confirmed, detectives began reconstructing her final hours. The timeline was tight, unsettlingly so. Her roommates confirmed she was alive and studying at home until at least 1:30 a.m. Forensic analysis of her computer later revealed activity as late as 3:30 a.m., proving she had remained in the house for hours after being left alone. Sometime after that, everything changed. Investigators quickly ruled out sexual assault. The medical examiner found no signs pointing in that direction. That shifted focus toward another motive. When detectives searched Eve's room, they noticed her wallet and credit cards were missing. Her phone was also gone. Robbery moved to the top of the suspect list. Police checked her financial records and found something alarming. Just minutes after her computer activity stopped, someone attempted to withdraw money from her bank account. 2 successful withdrawals totaled $700, the maximum daily limit. Additional attempts were blocked. The ATM used was located across town. Security footage from that ATM provided a crucial lead. The video showed Eve's car parked at the machine. A man was visible using her card. In the back seat, there appeared to be another figure, possibly Eve, but the image was too grainy to confirm. Still, investigators now knew her car had been taken, and she may have been alive during at least part of the ordeal. More withdrawals followed at other ATMs, but many lacked cameras. Then, days later, another attempt was made at a convenience store ATM, this time captured on video. Shockingly, the person using the card was not the same man seen earlier. Now, investigators faced a disturbing possibility: more than one suspect. Police released both surveillance images to the public, hoping someone would recognize the individuals. Tips poured in, but most led nowhere. Meanwhile, Eve's car was discovered abandoned just miles from her home. Forensic teams processed it thoroughly, searching for fingerprints, DNA, and trace evidence that could identify the killers. As fear spread across Chapel Hill, students locked doors, traveled in groups, and questioned their sense of safety. The idea that Eve might have been forced from her home during a random robbery terrified the community. The investigation was moving, but the killers were still free until one phone call changed everything. On March 12th, an anonymous tip came in that detectives couldn't ignore. The caller claimed to recognize the man in the convenience store ATM footage. He gave a name, Dario Atwater. Detectives immediately began digging into Atwater's background, and what they found was deeply troubling. At just 21 years old, he already had a lengthy criminal history, including arrests for robbery, assault, and drug-related offenses. He had served time, been released early, and repeatedly returned to crime. Even more alarming, Atwater was scheduled to appear in court just days after Eve's murder for carrying a handgun while on probation. Mugshots were pulled. The resemblance to the surveillance footage was undeniable. Police moved quickly and brought Atwater in for questioning. He denied involvement, but the video evidence was enough to hold him. As investigators expanded their inquiry, another name surfaced repeatedly in phone records: 17-year-old Lawrence Lovett's background mirrored Atwater's, young, violent, and already deeply entrenched in criminal activity. When detectives compared Lovett's mugshot to the earlier ATM footage, they recognized him immediately. He was the driver. Unlike Atwater, Lovett didn't surrender quietly. He barricaded himself inside his home, forcing authorities to deploy a SWAT team. After a tense standoff, he was arrested. Cell phone data sealed the connection. Both suspects' phones had pinged near Eve's neighborhood during the night of the murder, despite them living elsewhere. The evidence painted a chilling picture. The crime was random. Eve was chosen simply because she was visible, alone, and vulnerable. Investigators now believed the two men had broken into her home armed, forced her into her own car, and driven her around the city withdrawing money. Once they hit the daily withdrawal limit, they took her to a deserted area. That's where they killed her, facing the death penalty. Dario Atwater eventually agreed to a plea deal. In exchange for life imprisonment instead of execution, he confessed. What he described was horrifying, according to Atwater. He and Lovett went out that night intending to rob someone. Driving through a residential area near the university, they noticed Eve inside her home. Armed with guns, they broke in and forced her into her own vehicle. They drove from ATM to ATM, demanding money while Eve begged to be released. She promised she wouldn't report them. It didn't matter. Atwater admitted they decided to kill her because she had seen their faces. On a deserted street, they shot her multiple times. Before it happened, Eve asked them to pray with her. They refused. In 2010, Atwater was convicted and sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. He apologized to Eve's parents in court, acknowledging he deserved his punishment. Lovett's case was more complicated. As a minor, he could not face the death penalty. He was convicted and sentenced to life, though his sentence was later challenged under juvenile sentencing laws. Despite appeals and retrials, he ultimately received life imprisonment again. Justice, while delivered, felt incomplete. Eve Carson's death sent shockwaves far beyond Chapel Hill. Her case sparked national conversations about violent crime, repeat offenders, and juvenile sentencing. In North Carolina, lawmakers enacted stricter penalties for gang-related offenses, directly influenced by the tragedy. At the University of North Carolina, Eve's memory lives on. A scholarship was established in her name. A memorial garden stands as a quiet reminder of a life defined by service, intellect, and promise. Friends remember her not as a victim, but as a force. Someone who inspired others to dream bigger, work harder, and live with purpose. One of her close friends later shared publicly that Eve's death pushed him to pursue his own dreams, something he believed she would have wanted. Eve Carson was not defined by how she died. She was defined by how fully she lived, and by remembering her story, we ensure that the world never forgets who she truly was.